Hi everyone, it's Tarrant.
And Stella from Meeple University. Thanks for joining us.
Today we'll be teaching you how to play Tiletum, game designed by the duos Simone Luciani and Daniele Tascini, and published by Board and Dice.
Let's get to the game.
In Tiletum, players are merchants in Renaissance-era Western Europe, spreading their influence to earn fame, favour, fortune, and ultimately victory points. Players will use their architects to build cathedrals, spread their merchants to build trading houses, participate in fairs, earn favour from the king, house characters from the different families, and fulfill contracts, all in the aim of gaining victory points. The player with the most points over 4 rounds of play will win the game. I won't step you through setup, but I'll show you what the board is like once you're done. The board is going to be extensively seeded with a number of these square tiles, and before you set up, you're going to have removed tiles that don't match your player count. There are character tiles which make up the character row, contract tiles which make up the contract row, and bonus tiles showing this back, which will be seeded all over the map and in the king's area and action wheel. Gaining, scoring and managing these tiles is going to be one of the biggest parts of the game. In the centre of the action wheel is a randomly rotated disc showing different die faces, which will be a big part of the game's dice drafting mechanic. And you will have created a dice bag containing 1 die per colour per player. This bottom track shows the King's Favour track, with a number of points that you can gain or lose by keeping in good with the King. Then there's a number of features on the game's main map. Each player's 2 moving pieces, the Architect and Merchant, begin the game in Tiletum. And each player also starts with a trading house built on one of the house spaces there. Around the map there are other cities with house spaces to be built, and some which may not be available at your player count. There are bonus tiles seeded in many cities. And there are some cities with stacks of cathedrals, each of which is stacked on a predetermined place. These are stacked on the map from highest point value down to lowest. The stone cost to build each cathedral is determined randomly by laying out these tiles. And in each game there'll be 1 cathedral which is not available to be built at all. Finally, and importantly, at the top of the board you'll be able to see, by the placement of these tiles, the random intermediate scorings which will occur during each of the fairs. This fair and scoring objective is resolved at the end of round 1, this one after round 2, round 3 and round 4. These seal markers are placed in the relevant cities so you know which round they're going to score in. This ribbon also shows you endgame scoring, which is the same in every game. Each player begins with a player board and some starting resources. In addition to the game's basic resources, the quantity of which will depend on your starting position in turn order, this will include 2 trading houses and 2 pillars, which are available for immediate use. The player boards have 5 trading houses and 5 pillars which begin the game locked and need to be unlocked to your supply before you'll be able to use them. Players also begin with bonus action tiles which are unlocked during the game. So, with that initial context, let's have a look at how to play Tiletum. Tiletum is played in 4 rounds, and the first step of each round is preparation. Draw a number of dice from the bag equal to 8 in a 2-player game, 11 in a 3-player game, or 14 in a 4-player game. Roll them and then arrange them around the action wheel so that each is in the wedge which corresponds to its die face on the central wheel. You'll then move to the action phase. Before the first player takes a turn, flip the rightmost corruption marker on this track of tokens. This will show a number between 0 and 2 and move all players' markers simultaneously down the king's track that many spaces. You'll do this before each of the first player's 3 turns for the round, meaning that you'll flip the 3 tokens laid out and not the ones in the stack. Then players take turns, one at a time, in turn order, until each player has taken a total of 3 turns. To begin your turn, choose and take any one die from the wheel. Before taking the die, you may choose to spend 2 coins to adjust its number of pips up or down by 1. And when you do that, move the die to its new corresponding wedge. You can do this multiple times for the same die, and you can wrap a 6 around into a 1, or vice versa. Having chosen a die, if there is a bonus token in that die's wedge, you may now optionally take it. I'll explain the particulars around taking square tiles shortly. Next, gain resources corresponding to the colour of the die equal to the number on the die. So here, for example, 1 food. These grant food, gold, iron, wool and stone respectively. Resources gained go into the supply beside your player board, and there's no limit on how much you can hold. Finally, you gain and may set about spending a number of action points in the action corresponding to your die's wedge, equal to the number in the curly brackets. In this case, you'd have 6 action points on the king's action. As you can see from the wheel, the number of action points plus the number of resources always equals 7. And you can use these tokens to track your action points if you've got a complex turn on the go. You will take the die from the board and put it on your player board to track your turns. The number on your die is going to result in you gaining resources, and the action points from your die will either give you more resources or tiles, or move your components around the main board. There's also a number of free actions in the game called tasks, and you can do any number of these on your turn at any time, including between the spending of action points. A lot of the tasks in the game involve spending your resources to gain victory points or other bonuses. And so remember to keep that flow in mind. The dice are going to give you your components and movement, and the free actions are going to let you spend it and convert it into points. When only 2 dice remain, each player will have taken 3 turns and the action phase is over. Then follows 2 intermediate scoring phases. In the king phase, players will gain or lose points for their space on the king track, revise turn order from highest to lowest, and the leader will gain the bonus tile. Then players with either a trading house or merchant in the current round's fair city will score points for the fair objective, and then you'll clean up and prepare for the next round. But we'll cover all of those intermediate phases later in the video. Before we talk about the different actions, we need to understand how to use the game's square tiles. Based on the fronts of the tiles, there are 4 different types: white helper tiles, red character tiles, blue contract tiles, and brown crest tiles. These are split into 3 different types of tiles by their backs. The character tiles are all characters, the contract tiles are a mix of contracts and crests, and the bonus tiles are a mix of contracts, crests, and helpers. Each player board has an area called the storehouse, which has room for 4 tiles. Any time a tile is gained, it must be moved to an empty space on the player's storehouse. Once there, it cannot be voluntarily discarded. The player must correctly resolve that tile in order to take it out of the storehouse. This will have important timing implications on your play. You can't stockpile these early if you don't have a way of getting them out of your storehouse. Otherwise, you won't be able to take any more. Helpers are the easiest to resolve. They can be discarded for their bonus at any time on your turn as a task, but sometimes you'll want to time these for where it's most optimal. Characters are moved into empty slots in your houses as part of taking the character action. Contracts are completed by spending the matching resources as a task, that is, as a free action, to move that contract to your completed contracts area. And crests are completed also as a task by spending food to move the crest to one of your crest spots at the bottom of the houses. And we'll remind you of those again later when it comes to the relevant actions, but that's what we will do now. look at each of the main action point driven actions in the game. The first and simplest action is the king action, indicated by the crown. For each of your action points, advance your marker one step on the king track. If you finish on the same space as another player, place your marker on top. Whoever marker is on the bottom of a space is considered to be ahead on the track. If you reach the top space of the track and have more action points to spend, any excess are lost. Second, we'll talk about the contract action. When you gain contract action points, there are two different ways to spend them. Firstly, you can take tiles from the contract row, and each tile costs a number of action points as shown here. For example, taking these would cost 5 action points. Do not immediately replenish them. Your other option is to spend any number of contract action points to exchange that many resources for that many other resources, plus gain one more resource. This bonus resource is gained only once per turn. An example here would be spending 2 action points to exchange 2 stone for 2 iron and a wool. Once your full turn is complete, slide any remaining tiles in the contract row as far to the right as you can and replenish from the top of the deck. Contracts are fulfilled from your storehouse as a task, and for the most part they require you to spend combinations of iron or wool. For example, this player could spend 7 iron to fulfill this contract. The contract tile is moved to the leftmost open contract slot, and if there's a pillar on that contract, then that is added to the player's supply. The player then gains the points on the contract tile, the points covered under the contract tile, and any other bonus as shown here. This, for example, would be 1 king action point. Some contracts can be made up using the wild resource shown with this bag here, but if there is a cluster of bag resources required, all must match. Right now, this player could only meet this contract with the 3 wool and 3 food. There's also one other indirect option. As a task at any point on a player's turn, a player may spend 2 gold to gain any one other resource. This is one of the flexibilities of gold and would let this player fulfill this contract with wool and stone. Using contracts to unlock pillars will aid players with the next action, which is the architect. Each architect action point may be spent in one of 3 ways. Firstly, to move your architect from its current city to an adjacent city. Secondly, to pick up a bonus tile which is in your architect's current city. These are first come, first served. Once they've been taken, they're never replenished. Thirdly, you can place a pillar from your supply onto your architect's current city as long as you don't already have a pillar there. Once your pillar is in a city, then as a task you may contribute to the construction of that cathedral, even if your architect has since moved on. Each player may do this once per cathedral per game. Spend stone equal to the variable cost showing on the tile under those cathedrals. Then gain the top tile from that stack and score points as shown on both the cathedral tile and the cost tile. Keep the cathedral near your player board in case it scores again later as part of a fair. The next action is the character action, and this is probably the one with the most arms and legs. Each of your character action points may be spent in one of 3 ways. First, you can spend 1 action point to take a character from the display and add it to your storehouse. Replenish it immediately. Second, you can spend 1 action point to sweep out the 5 characters in the display, add 5 new characters to the display, and shuffle the ones you discarded back into the draw pile. Thirdly, you can move a character from your storehouse to an open space in one of your houses. The action point cost to do this depends on whether you're putting it in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd level of a house. Immediately gain the reward in the top left of that tile. There are 5 different types of character in the game. Once you've placed a certain character in a certain house, no other character may go in that house, and that character may not go in any other house. Once all of the rooms in a house have been filled, then you gain the trading house from its roof and place it into your supply for later use. A filled house is indicated by this icon here. The other thing that you can do with your houses is move crests from your storehouse to the crest spaces at the bottom. There is no main action for this. All of this is done with tasks. There are 6 different crests in the game, and you are never allowed to gain more than 1 copy of the same crest, whether it be in a crest slot or your storehouse. As a task, choose any open crest slot, pay the amount of food shown on the slot, and then move the crest into that slot, taking the bonus on the lower half of what you've covered. Some of these are quite helpful on the map. This, for example, lets you place a pillar anywhere on the map, even if your architect's not there. And this one lets you jump your architect to any spot on the map. The other benefit is crests let you complete houses. Once you get to the situation where a house is both completely full of its rooms and has a crest, that house is now complete. Note the height of that house and then take one of your bonus action tokens corresponding to that amount. Then check which action is shown on those characters in the building and put that action marker outside that wedge on the wheel. From now on, when you select that action from the wheel, you gain these extra action points to that action. You don't gain any action point bonus when you put a crest on your rightmost house, but it does count as a completed house. The 5th action is the merchant, and this acts in more or less the same way as the architect action. For each action point, you have 3 options. You can move your merchant along a path to an adjacent space. You can pick up a bonus tile in your merchant's current city, or you can build a trading house from your supply in your merchant's current city on a trading house space which matches your player count. Some trading houses give you immediate points when you build them, while some grant you this immediate house bonus, letting you reactivate the top left corner bonuses on each character in one of your houses. You also need to be taking these actions to make sure that your merchants have a presence at each of the fairs. When the time comes to resolve a fair, London's for example would be at the end of the 3rd round, you must either have a trading house in the city or your merchant's piece in the city in order to benefit from this intermediate scoring. If you meet neither condition, you'll score nothing. The 6th and final action space is the Joker, and this is a wild action. Take resources according to the Joker's die, and then pick one of the other 5 actions and resolve it using the Joker's number of action points. If you've chosen an action where you've already unlocked bonus action points, you count those too. So the blue player here could use this to get 8 character points. Once all players have taken 3 turns, it's time for intermediate scoring, and the first step is the king phase. Whoever disc is furthest along the king track gets to take the king's bonus token for the round, and if there isn't one, the player gets 4 points. If this player does not want the bonus tile, then it is discarded from the game. Then all players score positive or negative points based on their current position on the king track. Then reset turn order from highest to lowest on the king track. So here it would be orange, then green, then blue, then red. Then any players with negative king points reset to 0 in their current order. So stack those who are behind on top of those that are in front, like so. Players on the positive side stay where they are. Then comes the fair, and all players who have a trading house or merchant in the fair city resolve the fair objective. To do this, add up the printed points and the tile points and then multiply it by the tile's objective. In this case, it would be 4 points for each pillar the player has on the map. In this case, it's 11 points for each pair of a trading house and a pillar on the map. And a full list of objectives can be found in the rulebook. Flip the tile over once the fair is done. Finally, clean up for the next round. Refill any empty bonus slots on the action wheel. and refill the king's bonus space unless it's the 4th round, in which case you leave it empty. Shuffle up all 6 of the corruption tokens and then deal 3 new ones out onto these spaces. Return all drawn and leftover dice to the bag and rotate the action wheel 1 step clockwise. You'll now proceed to the next round. After the 4th fair is complete, the game is over and you'll add your final scores. First gain points based on your number of completed houses, that is every room full and a crest underneath. 3, 4, 5 or 6 houses will give you 5, 10, 20 or 30 points. Next, count up how many trading houses you have on the map and multiply it by the number of pillars you have on the map. Score that many points. Finally, leftover resources convert into points at 4 to 1. The player with the highest score wins, and if tied, new turn order after the final king phase breaks the tie. And that's how to play Tiletum. We hope you enjoyed this video.
If you find this useful, please help us by hitting the like button. Subscribe to us. You can also hit the meeple on the corner to do that. And hit the bell icon so you'll know when we have new videos. You can also follow me on Instagram for my board games journey.
Questions, comments and feedback are all welcome in the comments section below.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.